You know, the human skull is an absolute masterpiece of evolution. It's this rigid, bony vault that's perfectly designed to protect our most vital organ, the brain. But what happens when that ultimate protector becomes a trap? What happens when a bleed starts inside and that unyielding strength suddenly becomes the brain's single greatest threat?
Okay, so to really get a handle on this crisis, we need a clear map. We're going to start with a fundamental problem of pressure. Then we'll explore the different kinds of bleeds based on exactly where they happen, from the outer layers right down into the deepest parts of the brain. And finally, we'll look at the incredible, urgent race against time that doctors face to save a life. All right, first things first, we have to understand the core crisis here. And it isn't just about losing blood, it's about what that blood does in a space that literally cannot expand. This is the single most important question you can ask. Think about it. If you get a bruise on your arm, it swells up, right? The skin stretches, but the brain is locked inside the skull. There is no escape route. There's nowhere for that pressure to go. And that's where we get the official term intracranial hemorrhage. It just means bleeding anywhere inside the skull. But as that blood pools, it skyrockets the intracranial pressure, or ICP. And this pressure is a killer. It literally squeezes the delicate brain tissue, cutting off its own blood supply and causing catastrophic damage. It is, pure and simple, a crisis of space. Now, you hear the term brain bleed, and you might think it's just one thing, but that's pretty misleading. There are actually 5 distinct types, and everything, the diagnosis, the symptoms, the treatment, it all comes down to one critical factor: location. Where that bleed happens determines absolutely everything. So this map here breaks it down for us beautifully. You've got bleeds that happen right under the skull, like epidural and subdural. Go a little deeper and you're in the subarachnoid space, and then you can have bleeding deep inside the brain tissue itself. That's intracerebral, or even inside its fluid-filled chambers, which we call the ventricles. So let's start with those first 2 layers, right underneath the bone. Both are often caused by head trauma, but you'll see they behave in completely different ways. The difference between these two is just striking. Okay, on one hand, you have an epidural hemorrhage. This is usually from a torn artery, a classic cause being a skull fracture. Arteries mean high pressure, fast bleeding. And this can lead to that infamous lucid interval, where a person gets knocked out, seems totally fine for a bit, and then suddenly crashes. On a CT scan, the blood is under so much pressure it forms a tight, lens-shaped bulge. Now, a subdural is totally different. It's typically a torn vein, so it's a slower, lower pressure bleed. It spreads out, creating a crescent shape on the scan, and often leads to a much more gradual decline, with confusion that gets worse over hours or even days. Okay, let's move a layer deeper into the delicate space where our cerebrospinal fluid flows. A bleed here is a whole different kind of emergency. Now, this phrase you see here, this is not an exaggeration. It is a critical, textbook diagnostic clue. When a patient comes in and describes a headache that was sudden, severe, like a bomb went off in their head, literally the worst headache of their life, doctors immediately think subarachnoid hemorrhage. So what is actually happening here? Well, most of the time, a tiny, weak bulge in an artery, it looks like a little berry, so they call it a berry aneurysm, it just bursts. And the blood doesn't just pool in one spot, it explodes into the subarachnoid space, mixing with the fluid that's supposed to be cushioning the brain. This blood is incredibly irritating to the brain's protective layers, the meninges, and that's what causes that horrific headache and stiff neck. A huge complication here is something called vasospasm, where other arteries in the brain clamp down in response, cutting off blood flow and causing a stroke. All right, now we're going from the spaces around the brain to bleeds happening deep inside the brain tissue itself and its internal fluid-filled rooms. And here you can see the crucial link between these 2 deep bleeds. An intracerebral hemorrhage is bleeding directly into the main wiring of the brain, the parenchyma. And the number 1 cause, by far, is chronic high blood pressure. It just weakens those deep arteries over years until one finally gives way. Now, an intraventricular hemorrhage is when that blood finds its way into the brain's fluid-filled chambers. This almost never happens on its own. It's usually because a nearby intracerebral bleed got so big that it burst through the wall and flooded the ventricular system. So we've got 5 different types of bleeds, 5 different locations. How in the world do medical teams respond to a crisis where literally every single second counts? This is job number 1, non-negotiable. A fast, non-contrast CT scan is the go-to tool. Why? Because fresh blood shows up as bright white on the scan. It allows doctors to immediately see the bleed, get a sense of its size, and, most importantly, pinpoint its location. And as we've seen, that location tells them everything they need to know.
Even while the patient is on their way to the scanner, the team is already hard at work. The immediate priority is always the EBCs: airway, breathing, and circulation. They have to secure the airway to make sure the patient can breathe. They support breathing, often with extra oxygen. And they work like crazy to control blood pressure. You have to stabilize the patient before you can even think about fixing the underlying problem. So what determines if someone will recover? Well, it's not random. It really depends on this combination of factors. The size and location of the bleed are huge, of course. So is the patient's age and their general health. But the one factor that the medical team can control is the speed of treatment. The faster that patient gets to a hospital and gets care, whether it's emergency surgery or medication to control the pressure, the better their chances are. It's that simple.
If you remember just one thing from all of this, let it be this right here. The specific anatomy, the location of the bleed, is what defines the problem and causes the first symptoms. But from the second that vessel ruptures, the clock is ticking. It's the speed of diagnosis and intervention that truly determines a patient's chance of survival and recovery. And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. We know the problem is a fixed box and rising pressure. Today's treatments are all about getting the blood out or lowering that pressure. But looking down the road, what kind of innovations could one day solve this fundamental architectural problem of the skull during a crisis like this? That's a question that neuroscientists and doctors are racing to answer.